There's a particular kind of fear that doesn't announce itself with trembling hands or racing hearts, but with the quiet certainty that you'll destroy the very thing you long to protect. Damien knew that fear intimately. He'd built his entire life around it, constructing walls so high that nothing pure could reach him. Nothing innocent could be tainted by what he'd become. He wasn't afraid of darkness. He was afraid of bringing darkness to light. Until a woman walked into his gallery, opening with eyes so clear they seemed to hold entire skies, and he realized some things are worth being afraid of. If this story moves you, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel this was worth your time, consider becoming a member for early access to upcoming stories. Your support means everything. The gallery was all sharp angles and cold light, the kind of space designed to make you feel small in the presence of art. Damien preferred it that way. He'd curated the exhibition himself, choosing pieces that spoke of isolation, of beauty found in broken things, of the distance between wanting and having. The opening night crowd moved through the space like well-dressed ghosts, their champagne flutes catching the track lighting, their conversations a low hum that never quite reached genuine emotion. Damien stood in the corner, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching, always watching. At 38, he'd perfected the art of being present while remaining untouchable. His dark suit was tailored to precision, his silver-streaked hair swept back from a face that women called handsome and men called intimidating. He cultivated both reactions. They kept people at exactly the right distance. He'd learned early that distance was survival. At 16, when his father's business empire crumbled into scandal and his mother's pills became her only companion. At 22, when the woman he thought he loved sold his secrets to tabloids for a price he couldn't compete with. At 29, when he'd built his own fortune in art dealing and realized money couldn't buy back innocence, only insulate you from its loss. So Damien dealt in beautiful things he could never truly possess. Paintings, sculptures, rare photographs. He understood their value, their fragility, their need for careful handling. He understood that some things were meant to be admired from behind velvet ropes, never touched, never claimed, never ruined by human hands that didn't know their own capacity for destruction. The sculpture at the center of the gallery was his favorite, a woman carved from white marble, her face turned upward, her expression caught between ecstasy and agony. The artist had called it anticipation. Damien called it a warning. He was considering a second whiskey when the crowd parted and she appeared. She wasn't supposed to be there. The opening was invitation only, carefully curated guests who understood the unspoken rules of high-end art events. But there she was, standing in front of the marble sculpture, her head tilted in genuine curiosity rather than affected appreciation. She wore a simple navy dress that fell just below her knees, modest in a room full of designer excess. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame a face that held none of the calculated beauty he was accustomed to. She wore minimal makeup, and her shoes were practical flats rather than the stilettos that echoed through the space all evening. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Green, bright, absolutely clear. The kind of eyes that hadn't yet learned to hide what they felt. She reached out toward the sculpture, her fingers stopping just inches from the marble. Hovering in that space between desire and restraint, Damien found himself moving before he'd decided to, crossing the gallery floor with the predatory grace that had served him well in business negotiations and kept him alone in everything else. "Excuse me." His voice came out rougher than intended. She startled, pulling her hand back quickly, turning to face him. "I'm sorry. I wasn't going to touch it, She paused, biting her lower lip. "It's so beautiful. I wanted to see if it felt as smooth as it looks." Damien studied her, Up close, she was younger than he'd thought. Mid-20s, perhaps. There was something unfinished about her, not in appearance, but in presence, as though she hadn't yet hardened into the person she would become. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. But there was no accusation in his tone, only curiosity. She flushed, color rising in her cheeks in a way he hadn't seen in years. Women in his world had learned to control such tells. "I know. I'm so sorry. My roommate works for the catering company, and she said I could come in through the back to see the art before they opened. I didn't realize it had already started." "I should go." She turned to leave, but Damien found himself speaking again. "What do you see?" She stopped, glancing back at him with those impossibly clear eyes. "In the sculpture." "What do you see?" She looked at the marble woman again, her expression softening. "I see someone waiting for something she knows might hurt her, but wanting it anyway. Someone who understands that some things are worth the pain of reaching for them." Damien felt something shift in his chest, a small crack in foundations he'd thought were permanent. "Most people see ecstasy," he said quietly, "or agony. They can't hold both at once." She met his gaze directly. "But isn't that what makes it true? That both exist together? That wanting something doesn't mean it won't hurt?" His hand tightened around the whiskey glass. "Who are you?" She smiled, small and genuine. "Elena. I'm sorry for intruding. This was clearly a mistake." She gestured vaguely at the room, at the designer dresses and expensive watches, at the world she clearly didn't belong to. "I should let you get back to your guests." Damien should have let her go, should have nodded politely and returned to his corner, to his whiskey, to the safe distance he maintained from everything that felt too real. Instead, he heard himself say, "Stay. Walk through the exhibition with me. Tell me what you see." Elena hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. "I don't know anything about art. Not the technical stuff, anyway." "Good," Damien replied. "Then you won't lie to me about what you feel." He offered his arm, a gesture so old-fashioned it surprised even him. After a moment, she took it, her touch, light, tentative. They moved through the gallery together, Damien explaining the provenance of each piece, while Elena offered observations that had nothing to do with market value and everything to do with emotional truth. In front of a photograph of an abandoned church, she said, "Whoever took this believed in something once and lost it. You can see it in how the light falls. They're still looking for what they left behind." Before a painting of a woman's bare back, she whispered, "She's not being vulnerable. She's being brave. There's a difference." At a sculpture of intertwined hands cast in bronze, she touched the plaque gently. "These people hurt each other. You can tell by how tight they're holding on. Like they're afraid. If they let go, they'll lose each other forever." Damien found himself telling her things he never shared. The artist was dying when she made that piece. She and her husband had been married 43 years. This was her last work. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from the sculpture. That makes it even more beautiful. That she used her last strength to show love isn't always gentle. That sometimes holding on hurts. But we do it anyway. They reached the far end of the gallery, where a single painting hung alone on a black wall. It was Damien's private collection, not for sale, rarely shown, an abstract piece, all dark blues and deep purples, with a single slash of gold cutting through the center. Elena stood before it for a long time without speaking. Damien watched her face, watched the play of emotions he couldn't name, watched her lean closer, as if the painting were whispering secrets only she could hear. Finally, she turned to him. "This one is yours. Not just owned by you. This one is you." Damien's breath caught. "How did you know?" She gestured at the canvas. Because everything else in this gallery is about other people's pain, other people's beauty. But this one is personal. This is what it looks like inside someone who's forgotten how to feel anything but one thing. She pointed at the slash of gold, and that's what they're afraid of, the thing that might make them feel everything else again. Damien took a step back, his carefully constructed composure cracking. "You should go," he said, his voice low and rough. Elena blinked, confusion replacing her certainty. "Did I say something wrong?" "You should go," he repeated, but he couldn't make it sound convincing. "You don't belong here, with these people, with me." Elena's expression shifted, understanding dawning. "Oh," she said softly, "you think I'm too innocent for this world, for your world." Damien turned away, unable to bear the clarity in her eyes. "I don't think it. I know it. You walked in here and saw beauty and truth and hope in things designed to showcase their absence. You don't understand what that means. What does it mean? That you still have a chance to stay that way, uncorrupted, unspoiled." He forced himself to meet her gaze. "I've spent 20 years learning to see the world as it really is. Dark, transactional, empty of the things you seem to find so easily. I won't be responsible for teaching you the same lessons Elena didn't move. And you think knowing me would do that? Corrupt me?" "Yes." He said it simply, brutally. "Everything I touch turns complicated. Everyone who gets close to me learns to regret it. You're too innocent for me, Elena. Too genuine. Too," he struggled for the word, "too untouched by the kind of cynicism that makes people like me survivable." She stepped closer, and Damien found he couldn't move away. "You don't know anything about me," she said quietly. "You don't know what I've survived, or what I've learned, or what I'm capable of handling. You looked at me and decided I was innocent because I don't wear armor like you do. But maybe I'm just brave enough not to need it." Damien felt the crack in his foundation widen. "Elena, please, if you knew, if you understood what I've done, the person I've become." "I would still be standing here," she interrupted, "because I don't see people as corrupted or innocent. I see them as human. And you're trying so hard to convince me you're some kind of monster. But all I see is someone who's afraid." "Of what?" he whispered. "Of wanting something you think you don't deserve," she replied. The gallery around them seemed to fade, the other guests becoming mere shadows. Damien looked at this woman who'd appeared from nowhere and seen through him in minutes, and he felt the fear he'd lived with for so long transform into something else, something more dangerous. "I should walk away from you," he said. His voice was barely audible. "You probably should," Elena agreed. Neither of them moved. The exhibition ended near midnight. Damien watched the last guests filter out, their voices carrying false promises to lunch soon, to collaborate on future projects, to stay in touch. He'd learned to translate the language of his world. Everything meant nothing. Everyone performed closeness while maintaining distance. Elena had stayed, helping the catering staff clear glasses despite having no obligation to do so. He watched her laugh with her roommate, watched her carefully stack champagne flutes, watched her move through the space as if beauty and kindness could coexist naturally. It made something in his chest ache. When the gallery was finally empty, except for the two of them and the cleaning crew, Elena approached him. Her ponytail was slightly askew now, and there was a small stain on her dress from where someone had bumped into her with red wine. She'd apologized to them. "I should probably actually leave now," she said with a small smile, "unless you need help closing up." Damien found himself saying, "Have dinner with me." She tilted her head. "It's nearly 1 in the morning. Breakfast then. Coffee. Anything." He paused, feeling exposed in a way that was both terrifying and oddly liberating. "I'm not ready for you to disappear," Elena studied him for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "But not tonight. Tonight you're going to go home and convince yourself this was a terrible idea, that I'm too innocent and you're too damaged and nothing good can come from this. Tomorrow, when you still want to see me anyway, call me." She pulled a business card from her small purse and handed it to him. It was simple white cardstock with her name and a phone number. No title, no company, no pretension. Just Elena Morrison and 10 digits that suddenly felt like the most important information he'd ever received. "How do you know I'll call?" he asked. "Because," she said, touching his arm briefly, gently, "you've spent all night trying to push me away, and you still asked me to stay. That means something." She turned to leave, then glanced back. "And Damien, I'm not as fragile as you think I am." She walked out before he could respond, leaving him standing in an empty gallery full of beautiful broken things and one business card that felt like a lifeline. She was right, of course. He went home to his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture and complete absence of anything personal. He poured himself another whiskey and stood looking out at the city lights, trying to convince himself that calling her would be a mistake. Elena was young, not just in years, but in spirit. She still believed in goodness, in beauty, in the possibility of connection without transaction. He would ruin that he would teach her to be suspicious, to guard herself, to understand that people always wanted something, and love was just another negotiation he'd done it before. Not intentionally, but inevitably. The women he'd dated over the years had all started with some spark of optimism, some hope that beneath his careful control was a man capable of genuine feeling. They'd all learned otherwise. They'd learned that Damien gave generously of everything except the one thing that mattered: himself. He finished the whiskey and poured another. The painting Elena had identified as his hung on the wall across from his window. He'd bought it 7 years ago from an artist who died 3 months later. The artist had told him it was called The Last Light. Damien had never asked what that meant. He'd simply known he needed it. Now, looking at it through Elena's eyes, he saw what she'd seen: the darkness that consumed most of the canvas, the single slash of gold that could have been hope or warning, or both. The suggestion that somewhere in all that emptiness, something still burned. He pulled out his phone and looked at her card, running his thumb over the embossed letters of her name. He should throw it away. Should forget this night ever happened. Should protect her from what he knew he was capable of doing to something pure. Instead, he saved her number and went to bed, where he didn't sleep, thinking about clear green eyes and the way she'd seen truth in art that was meant to hide it. Morning came too slowly and too fast. Damien went through his routine with mechanical precision. Shower, coffee, news, emails. He had a conference call with a collector in Dubai, a meeting with a restoration specialist, lunch with a gallery owner from Berlin. His day was structured, controlled, exactly as he preferred. He made it until 2 in the afternoon before he called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was warm, unsurprised. "I wondered if you'd make it past noon." Damien found himself smiling despite everything. "I'm calling to tell you this is a terrible idea, I assumed, and that I'm taking you to dinner tonight anyway." She laughed, and the sound did something to the careful walls he'd rebuilt overnight. 7 o'clock. 7, he confirmed. "And Elena?" "Yes." "Wear whatever you want. Don't try to fit into my world. I'm not interested in someone who fits." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "Good, because I wasn't planning to." Damien picked her up at a small apartment building in a neighborhood that thrived on authenticity rather than affluence. He'd sent a car, but she'd texted back that she'd prefer to meet him at the restaurant. He'd insisted on collecting her himself. Some part of him needed to see where she'd lived, needed to understand the world she inhabited, when she wasn't accidentally wandering into gallery openings. She emerged from the building in a green dress that matched her eyes, simple and elegant without trying to be. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and she wore a cardigan against the autumn evening chill. She looked exactly like herself, and Damien felt that dangerous crack in his foundation widen further. He'd brought the Aston Martin, not the town car with the driver. He wanted this to feel personal, even as part of him screamed that personal was exactly what he needed to avoid. Elena slid into the passenger seat and looked around with genuine appreciation. "This is beautiful," she said, running her hand along the leather. "Do you love driving it?" The question surprised him. Most people commented on the price or the status. Elena asked about his feelings. "I do," he admitted. "It's the only time I feel completely in control and completely free at the same time." She nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere I think you'll appreciate," he said, pulling into traffic. Not because it's expensive, but because it's real. The restaurant was in an old converted warehouse by the water. No pretension, no dress code, just exceptional food, and an atmosphere that valued substance over style. Damien had discovered it years ago and returned whenever he needed to remember that not everything in his world was performance. They sat at a corner table with a view of the harbor, where working boats mixed with expensive yachts, and the water reflected city lights in constantly shifting patterns. Elena looked out at the view and smiled. "You're trying to prove something to me, am I? That you're not just the person who stands in expensive galleries drinking whiskey and keeping everyone at arm's length." She turned that clear gaze on him. "You're trying to show me you're more than that." Damien leaned back in his chair. "And am I?" She considered him thoughtfully. "I don't know yet, but I appreciate the effort." They ordered, and over wine and perfectly prepared seafood, they began the careful dance of learning each other. Damien asked questions he normally wouldn't. "What do you do when you're not crashing art exhibitions?" Elena laughed. "I'm a children's librarian." "I know, not exactly glamorous. But I love it. I love finding the right book for the right kid, seeing their faces light up when a story speaks to them." "Why libraries?" he asked. "Why not teaching or writing, or something that pays better?" She broke a piece of bread, considering her answer. "Because libraries are democratic. Anyone can walk in. Rich, poor, doesn't matter. Everyone gets the same access to stories, to knowledge, to possibility. And kids, they come in so open. They haven't learned yet that some doors are supposed to be closed to them." Damien heard the edge in her words. "You have learned that some doors are closed." She met his eyes. "I grew up in foster care, 7 different homes before I aged out at 18. Worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college, then state school. Every door I've walked through, I've had to push open myself. So yes, I've learned about closed doors. I just refuse to believe they should stay that way." The revelation shifted something between them. Damien had assumed her innocence came from privilege, from being sheltered. Instead, it came from choice, from surviving things that should have made her cynical and deciding not to let them. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for assuming, for thinking you didn't understand difficulty." Elena shrugged. "People make assumptions. You saw someone who still believes in beauty and figured she'd never seen ugliness. But I've seen plenty. I just decided it doesn't get to win." Damien took a long sip of wine. "Tell me about the worst home, the worst foster placement." She studied him. "Why?" "Because I want to understand. I want to know what you survived that didn't break you." Elena was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. "The Richardsons," she said, finally. "I was 14. They took in foster kids for the monthly checks, and treated us like unpaid labor. I did all the cooking, cleaning, childcare for their biological children. School was something I fit in around their demands. Her voice was steady, factual. One night I broke a dish. Mr. Richardson locked me in the basement for 2 days. Damien's hand tightened on his glass. Elena, I called my social worker when they let me out. Got moved the next week. She looked up at him. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because you think I don't know darkness. But I do. I've lived in it. I just refuse to make my home there. She's not innocent, Damien realized. She's something far more dangerous. She's chosen hope with full knowledge of what it costs. They talked until the restaurant began closing around them. Damien shared things he normally kept locked away. His father's very public scandal and suicide. His mother's descent into addiction and eventual overdose. The women who'd used him for money, for status, for the doors his name could open. I learned early that everything is transactional, he told her. Love is just a prettier word for negotiation. People want things from each other, and they're willing to trade affection for them. Once you understand that, once you stop expecting anything different, it gets easier. Elena listened without judgment, her expression thoughtful. That sounds incredibly lonely. It is, he admitted. But it's safe. You can't be disappointed if you never expect anything real. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. The touch was gentle, warm, completely without demand. You know what I think? She said softly. I think you've built this whole philosophy about how dark and transactional the world is, not because you believe it, but because it protects you from hoping for something different. Damien wanted to pull away, to dismiss her words as naive optimism, but her hand on his felt like an anchor to something he'd thought was lost. Maybe, he said, or maybe I've just seen enough to know better. Or maybe, Elena continued, squeezing his hand gently, you've seen enough to be terrified, that if you hope for something real and don't get it, it will destroy you. So you destroy the possibility first. She pulled her hand back, but her eyes stayed on his. That's not wisdom, Damien. That's just fear. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things unsaid. Damien pulled up outside her building and turned off the engine. He should let her go. Should thank her for a pleasant evening and drive away and never call again. Instead, he said, I'm going to hurt you. If you keep seeing me, if this continues, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm going to be exactly the man I warned you about. I'm going to pull away when you get too close and keep you at a distance that makes connection impossible. And you're going to realize I was right, that I'm too damaged for this. For you. Elena unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him fully. Are you done? He blinked. With what? With telling me who you are and what I should expect and how I should feel about it. She leaned closer. Because here's what I know, Damien. You're scared. You're so scared of wanting something real that you're trying to sabotage this before it even starts. And I get it. I do. But I'm not going to make this decision for you. She reached for the door handle. If you want to see me again, call me. If you don't, then don't. But stop trying to protect me from you, like I'm some delicate thing that can't handle complicated emotions. I'm a grown woman who survived worse than a man with commitment issues. She paused, her hand on the door. The question isn't whether you'll hurt me. Everyone hurts everyone sometimes. The question is whether you're brave enough to try anyway. She got out of the car and walked to her building without looking back. Damien sat there for a long time, engine off, watching the light come on in what he assumed was her apartment. Everything in him screamed to drive away, to cut this off before it became something he couldn't control. But her words echoed. Not wisdom, just fear. He'd built an entire life on that fear, had convinced himself it was sophistication, experience, hard-won understanding. What if it was just cowardice? He pulled out his phone and texted her, "Tomorrow. Lunch. Let me show you my studio, the space I work in when I'm not performing for collectors. The real place, not the gallery." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, her response came. "Okay. But Damien, stop trying to warn me away. If I decide you're not worth the risk, I'll leave. Trust me to know my own mind." He stared at the message for a long time. Trust. Such a small word for such an enormous ask. He'd spent 2 decades learning not to trust anyone, including himself, especially himself. But he texted back, "Tomorrow at noon," and included the address. Then he drove home to his empty penthouse and stood in front of the painting Elena had understood so completely. And he wondered if that slash of gold had always been there, or if he just never had anyone who could teach him how to see it. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, he dreamed of green eyes and gentle hands, and a voice asking him why he was so determined to live in darkness when light kept trying to reach him. He woke before dawn, with a clarity that felt both liberating and terrifying. He'd spent his entire adult life protected from pain by staying disconnected. But Elena was right. Protection was just another word for prison. He'd kept himself safe and sentenced himself to loneliness. The question now was whether he was brave enough to risk the former to escape the latter. The studio was in a converted factory building in the arts district. Damien rarely brought anyone here. The gallery was for business, for the carefully curated image he presented to the world. The studio was where he did the real work, the restoration and research that made him one of the most respected art dealers in the country. He arrived early, unlocking the heavy metal door and climbing the concrete stairs to the 3rd floor. The space was vast and filled with morning light from industrial windows that ran the length of the east wall. Workbenches covered with tools and projects in various stages of completion. Books stacked on every available surface. A vintage record player in the corner, surrounded by milk crates full of albums. This was the place where Damien could breathe, where he didn't have to perform sophistication or maintain distance, where he could just be a man who loved beautiful things and the painstaking work of bringing them back to life. He'd been working for an hour when he heard her footsteps on the stairs. He'd left the door unlocked, a gesture of trust that surprised him. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, slightly out of breath, her cheeks flushed from the climb. She wore jeans and a soft sweater, her hair in a messy bun, and she looked absolutely perfect. "This is wonderful," she said, turning slowly to take in the space. "It smells like old books and linseed oil and coffee. It smells like someone actually works here." Damien gestured to a workbench where a damaged painting lay carefully supported. "This is what I do when I'm not selling art to people who see it as investment. I find broken pieces with good bones, and I restore them." He picked up a small brush. It's precise work. Patient. You can't rush it, or you'll do more damage than good. Elena approached the bench, studying the painting. It was a portrait of a young woman from the 1920s, her face partially obscured by water damage and age. "What will she look like when you're done?" Damien smiled. "That's the thing. I don't completely know. I can see hints of what she was, but full restoration requires making educated guesses. Sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you discover something even more beautiful than what was originally there." He handed Elena a magnifying glass. "Look at the brushwork on her collar. See how delicate it is. The artist cared about every detail, even the parts most viewers would never notice." Elena peered through the glass, her expression one of concentrated wonder. "It's like lace made of paint." "Exactly," Damien said. "And my job is to honor that care." to treat this piece with the same reverence the artist did. They spent the morning together, Damien explaining his process, while Elena asked questions that showed genuine interest. She wasn't performing fascination. She actually cared about the work, about the history, about the why behind what he did. Around 1, Damien's stomach reminded him they'd skipped lunch. He had a small kitchen area in the back of the studio, really just a hot plate and a mini fridge. But he managed to put together a simple meal of cheese, bread, fruit, and the good wine he kept for long restoration sessions. They ate sitting on the floor near the windows, sunlight warming the concrete beneath them. "So this is who you really are," Elena said. "Not the man in the expensive suit at the gallery opening. This person, the one who spends hours fixing damaged paintings because he believes they deserve to be whole again." Damien looked at his hands. "Stained with paint and chemicals, I suppose so. Though I'm not sure that man is any less damaged than the paintings." Elena set down her wine glass. "Tell me about your father. Really tell me. Not the public story. The private one." He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city visible through the windows. Then he began to speak. "My father was brilliant, charismatic. Everyone loved him. He built a financial empire from nothing, and he made it look easy." He paused. But behind closed doors, he was paranoid controlling. He saw threats everywhere, and enemies in everyone. What happened? Damien's jaw tightened. He made a series of bad investments and tried to cover them by moving money that didn't belong to him. When it all came out, when the prosecutors came, he couldn't bear the shame. He shot himself in his office while the FBI was serving the search warrant. Elena's hand found his. "I was 17, Damien continued, home from boarding school for the summer. I read about it in the news before anyone called to tell me. The first I knew my father was dead was seeing his face on CNN. I'm so sorry," Elena whispered. "The worst part," Damien said, his voice rough with old pain, "was everyone saying they never saw it coming, that he seemed so happy, so successful. And I realized I'd spent my whole life with this man, and I didn't actually know him. He was performing for me, too. Performing confidence and control while falling apart inside. And you decided never to be like him," Elena said softly. "Never to hide behind performance. So instead, you just keep everyone so far away they can't see you at all." Damien looked at her, this woman who saw through him with terrifying clarity. "Is that better? Than lying about who you are?" "Maybe not, but it feels safer." Elena shifted closer to him on the hard floor. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" He wanted to say no, wanted to keep that distance that had served him so well for so long, but he found himself nodding. "I see someone who's so afraid of becoming his father that he's built the opposite life," she said. "Your father hid his darkness behind brightness. So you display your darkness openly and hide the brightness. Your father let people close and lied to them. So you keep people away and tell the truth." She touched his cheek gently. "But Damien, you're still hiding. You've just found a different way to do it." Her words struck something deep inside him. He'd been so proud of his honesty, his refusal to perform intimacy he didn't feel. But she was right. It was still a performance, just a different kind. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "To let someone in without it being transactional, without there being an angle or an agenda. I don't know how to just be with someone." Elena smiled. "That's okay. Neither do I, really. The foster system doesn't exactly teach healthy attachment." She laughed softly. "We're both kind of disasters at this. Maybe that's why it works." "Does it work?" he asked. "This, whatever this is." "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But I'd like to find out." She paused. "Unless you're still trying to convince me I'm too innocent for you." Damien looked at her, really looked at her. The intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her gentle smile, the courage it took to keep choosing openness after everything life had thrown at her. "You're not innocent," he said quietly. "You're something much more dangerous. You're hopeful. And that terrifies me." "Good," Elena said. "You should be terrified. Hope is terrifying. It means believing something good might happen even though you have no guarantee. It means risking disappointment." She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "But I think you're ready for that. I think you've been ready for a long time. You just needed someone to be terrified with you." The afternoon stretched into evening. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they loved, music that moved them, childhood dreams they'd abandoned, and ones they still carried. Damien played her his favorite albums on the vintage record player, watching her close her eyes and sway to Miles Davis, to Billie Holiday, to songs about longing and loss and the complicated beauty of being human. When the light began to fade, Elena stood and walked to one of the large windows. The city was transforming into its nighttime self, all glittering lights and dark spaces between them. Damien came to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I like it here," she said. "In your real space, where you don't have to be the person you show the world." She turned to him. "Thank you for showing me this, for trusting me with it." Damien felt that dangerous warmth spreading through his chest again. "Elena, I have to tell you something." She waited, patient. "I want this. You. Us. Whatever this could become. But I'm going to be difficult. I'm going to pull away sometimes because that's what I know how to do. I'm going to disappoint you and frustrate you and make you question whether I'm worth the effort." She smiled. "I know. And I'm going to push you to be more open than is comfortable. I'm going to ask questions you don't want to answer and expect emotional availability you're not sure you can give. I'm going to challenge every wall you try to build." She moved closer. "So we'll both be difficult." "Does that scare you?" "Absolutely," he admitted. She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. "Good. Me too." Then she kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. Damien froze for a heartbeat, every instinct screaming at him to pull back, to maintain control, to keep that crucial distance. But then something in him surrendered, and he kissed her back, his hands coming up to frame her face, and suddenly gentle wasn't enough. The kiss deepened, became urgent, became a conversation they'd been having all along in careful words and cautious touches, but could finally speak plainly. Damien pulled her closer, feeling her arms wrap around his neck, feeling her body press against his, and he forgot about control, about distance, about all the careful rules he'd built his life around. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena looked up at him with those clear green eyes. "Still think I'm too innocent for you?" He laughed, the sound surprised out of him. "I think I'm an idiot who's been lying to himself." They moved to the small couch Damien kept in the corner of the studio, settling into each other, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. Elena's head rested on his chest, his arm around her shoulders, and the silence between them was comfortable, full of possibilities rather than demands. "I should probably tell you," Elena said after a while, her voice quiet in the dimming light, "that I'm not actually as brave as I've been acting." Damien's hand moved gently through her hair. "No," she shook her head against his chest. "I'm terrified. Of this. Of you. Of how much I already feel." She paused. "I've never let anyone this close before." "Not really. The foster system taught me that people leave, that attachment is dangerous, that it's safer to keep everything surface level." "So why now?" he asked. "Why me?" She lifted her head to look at him. "Because when I saw you at that gallery, surrounded by beautiful, expensive things, looking so alone in the middle of a crowd. I recognized you. I saw someone else who'd learned to survive by not needing anyone. And I thought, maybe if we're both scared, maybe if we're both broken in similar ways, maybe we could figure out how to be less scared together. Damien pulled her closer. I spent all day yesterday trying to convince myself to cancel, he admitted, telling myself this was a mistake, that I should stick to what I know, to relationships that have clear boundaries and expiration dates. But I kept thinking about what you said, that it wasn't wisdom keeping me alone, it was just fear. And what did you decide? That I'm tired of being afraid, he said. That I'm tired of safety if it means being lonely. That maybe, for the first time in 20 years, I want to try something real, even if it terrifies me, especially because it terrifies me. Elena kissed his jaw softly. We can be terrified together. Damien smiled. Is that your sales pitch? Honesty and mutual terror? She laughed. I'm a librarian, not a marketer. But yes, I think honesty and mutual terror is all I've got to offer. That and excellent taste in art, he added. She swatted his chest playfully. You just like that I understood your painting. I do, he admitted. No one else ever has. They see what they want to see. You saw what was actually there. They stayed on the couch as night fell completely, talking about smaller things now. Her favorite books, his worst restoration disaster, the coffee shop she went to every morning, the classical concerts he attended alone. Building the small intimacies that would become the foundation of something larger. Around 10, Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. My roommate checking if I've been murdered by the mysterious older man I went to meet Damien raised an eyebrow. Should I be offended by the assumption I'm a potential murderer? She grinned. You do have that brooding, dangerous vibe. It's part of your appeal, is it? Appeal? Absolutely, she said, texting back a response. Wounded? Sophisticated. Keeps everyone at arm's length. Very romantic hero. Damien laughed. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It definitely is, Elena assured him, though I should probably head home before my roommate actually calls the police. Damien stood, helping her up. Let me drive you. They gathered her things, and he locked up the studio, this space he'd shared with her, that he'd shared with almost no one else. It felt significant, like crossing some invisible line he'd drawn years ago and convinced himself was uncrossable. The drive to her apartment was comfortable, easy. They held hands across the center console, and occasionally Elena would point out a building or a street corner and tell him a story about something that had happened there. Slowly, he was learning the geography of her life, the small details that made her who she was. Outside her building, Elena unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't immediately get out. Thank you, she said. For today, for trusting me with your real space, your real self. Damien brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. Thank you for not running when I gave you every reason to. She smiled. I'm tougher than I look. I'm beginning to understand that, he said. When can I see you again? Tomorrow? She hesitated. I have a full day at the library, but there's a reading tomorrow night. Children's book author doing a presentation. You probably wouldn't be interested. I'll be there, Damien said immediately. Elena blinked, surprised. Really? You want to come to a children's book reading? I want to see you in your world, he said. You've seen mine. It's only fair. The library was nothing like Damien's usual haunts. No marble floors or track lighting or expensive wine. Instead, there were worn carpet tiles, fluorescent lights, and the particular smell of old books mixed with industrial cleaner children ran through the stacks, while parents tried to corral them. Teenagers huddled in corners with graphic novels. elderly patrons browsed the large print section with focused determination. Damien felt completely out of place in his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. But then he saw Elena, helping a small girl reach a book on a high shelf, her face lit with genuine joy, and he understood why she loved it here. This place was real. No performance, no pretense, just people and stories and the democratic magic of public access to knowledge. She spotted him and smiled, that small, shy smile that did things to his carefully controlled heart. She excused herself from the child and walked over. "You came," she said, sounding pleased and surprised in equal measure. "I said I would," Damien replied, "though I'm definitely overdressed." Elena laughed, just a little. "But it's okay. The kids will think you're a prince or a spy or something equally impressive. The reading doesn't start for another 20 minutes. Want a tour?" She showed him around, introducing him to her co-workers, who eyed him with obvious curiosity and thinly veiled protectiveness. She showed him the children's section she'd reorganized herself, grouping books by theme and emotion rather than just alphabetically. For kids dealing with loss, kids struggling with change, kids who felt different or alone. "You match books to feelings," Damien observed. Elena nodded. Sometimes a kid doesn't need escapism. Sometimes they need to know someone else understands what they're going through. She pulled a book from a shelf. "This one saved me when I was 12. It's about a girl in foster care who thinks she's unlovable. By the end, she realizes she was always worthy of love. She just needed to find the right people to see it." Damien took the book gently, looking at the worn cover. "Did it work? Did it make you believe you were worthy?" She shrugged, eventually. "It took a while. But yes, this book helped, along with a few others." She gestured at the shelves around them. "That's why this matters so much. These stories, they can change how kids see themselves, how they imagine their futures." The reading began, and Damien sat in the back on a tiny chair clearly meant for children, his knees nearly to his chest, watching Elena facilitate the event. She was completely in her element, engaging the children, asking questions that made them think, celebrating their observations no matter how simple she believed in them, he realized. Believed in their capacity for understanding, for empathy, for growth. After the reading, as Elena helped clean up scattered cushions and misplaced books, one of her co-workers approached Damien. "You're the art dealer, right?" The older woman, probably in her 60s, had sharp eyes behind her reading glasses. "I am," Damien confirmed. She studied him for a moment. "Elena's special." "I know," Damien said quietly. "I'm beginning to understand exactly how special." The woman nodded slowly. "She's also been hurt more than most people could handle. She puts on a brave face, stays positive, believes in the best in people. But that doesn't mean she's not fragile where it counts." Damien met her gaze directly. "I know that too. I have no intention of hurting her." The woman smiled, but it was sad. "No one ever does. That's not how it works." She patted his arm. "But I can see you care. So I'm trusting you to be careful with her heart. It's more precious than any art you've ever sold." When Elena finished, they walked out into the cool night air. Damien took her hand. "That was remarkable," he said. "Watching you work. You transform that space. Make it magical for those kids." Elena squeezed his fingers. "It's important work. Maybe not prestigious or high-paying, but important. Someone has to tell kids they matter, that their stories matter. Might as well be me." They walked to a small diner nearby, sliding into a corner booth with cracked vinyl seats and laminated menus. "This is my usual spot after evening programs," Elena explained. "Best pie in the city and coffee strong enough to keep you awake for the late bus ride home." Over coffee and pie, Elena asked the question he'd been expecting. "What did Margaret say to you?" Damien smiled. "Your protective coworker? She told me you were special and warned me not to hurt you." Elena groaned. "I'm so sorry. She means well, but—" "It's okay," Damien interrupted. "She's right to protect you, and she's right that you're special." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Elena, I need you to know that I'm taking this seriously. You, us, whatever we're building. I'm not good at this, and I'm probably going to mess up. But I'm trying." Elena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I know you are. I can see it in the way you showed up tonight, even though children's book readings are probably not your usual scene. In the way you've been honest about your fears, instead of pretending they don't exist." She paused. "Damien, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm just expecting honesty and effort, and you're giving me both." They finished their pie and coffee, and Damien insisted on driving her home despite her protests about the late bus being perfectly safe. "Some things aren't negotiable," he said, "and making sure you get home safely is one of them." Outside her apartment, Elena turned to him before getting out. "Do you want to come up? Just for a bit? I have wine. Terrible wine, but wine nonetheless." Damien knew he should say no, knew that going to her apartment, seeing her personal space, getting even more entangled in her life, would make it that much harder to maintain any kind of protective distance, but he found himself saying yes anyway. Her apartment was tiny, a studio with barely room for a bed, a small couch, and a kitchenette. But she'd made it beautiful. Books everywhere, arranged by color rather than author, plants on every available surface, soft lights and throw blankets, and the kind of deliberate coziness that spoke of someone who'd created home for herself when no one else would. "It's small," Elena said, suddenly self-conscious. "But it's mine. First place I've ever had that's just mine." "I love it," Damien said honestly. "It feels like you." She poured them wine in mismatched glasses, and they sat on her small couch, close together, because there was no other option in the limited space. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Elena said. "Something true." Damien was quiet, thinking. Then he spoke. "I'm terrified that I'm incapable of real love, that my father's damage and my mother's addiction and all the years I've spent protecting myself have broken something essential in me, that I can want connection desperately and still be unable to give what that requires." Elena listened, her expression serious. "And what would it look like? Real love for you?" Damien considered. "Someone seeing all of me, the parts I'm proud of and the parts I'm ashamed of, and choosing to stay anyway. Not because they want to fix me or save me, but because they believe I'm worth the complicated reality of who I actually am." He looked at her. "What about you? What does real love look like to you?" "Someone who doesn't leave," Elena said simply. "Everyone in my life has left. Foster parents, social workers, friends who promise to keep in touch. Everyone leaves eventually. So real love, for me, would be someone who stays. Through the hard parts, through the boring parts, through the moments when it would be easier to go. Someone who chooses me over and over again. I want to be that person," Damien said. "I want to choose you. I want to stay. But I need you to be patient with me while I learn how." Elena turned to him, her green eyes serious. "I can be patient. But Damien, I need something from you too. I need you to stop trying to push me away every time you get scared. I need you to trust that I can handle your complexity, your darkness, your fears. I'm not going to break." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. This kiss was different from the one in the studio, less desperate, more certain, a promise rather than a question. When they broke apart, Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "Stay tonight," she said quietly. "Just sleep. I don't want to be alone." Damien understood what she was really asking. Not for sex or seduction, but for presence, for someone to choose to stay when they could easily leave. "I'll stay," he said. They moved to her small bed, lying together fully clothed, wrapped in each other's arms. Damien listened to Elena's breathing slow and deepen as she fell asleep, and he marveled at how foreign this felt. Intimacy without agenda, closeness without transaction. Just two people choosing to be vulnerable together. He thought about the painting in his apartment, the one Elena had understood. The darkness with its single slash of gold. He'd always seen it as a reminder of what he'd lost, but maybe it was actually about what was still possible. Maybe that gold wasn't a memory of light, but a promise of it. Elena shifted in her sleep, burrowing closer, and Damien tightened his arms around her. For 20 years, he'd convinced himself that safety meant isolation, that the only way to avoid pain was to avoid connection. But lying here, holding this woman who'd survived abandonment and chosen hope anyway, he understood that he'd had it backwards. The real danger wasn't in opening his heart, it was in keeping it closed. Morning came softly, sunlight filtering through Elena's thin curtains. Damien woke to find her already awake, watching him with those clear green eyes. "Morning," she said, smiling. "Morning," he replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," he admitted, "but in a good way." She laughed. "I know exactly what you mean." They lay there for a while longer, neither wanting to break the spell of this quiet morning intimacy. Finally, Elena spoke. "What happens now?" Damien considered. "Now I stop running. Stop trying to convince you I'm not worth the effort. Stop sabotaging this before it has a chance to become something real." He kissed her gently. "Now I try, really try, to be the person who stays." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "That's all I ask." They got up eventually, made terrible coffee in Elena's tiny kitchen, and talked about ordinary things. Plans for the week, groceries that needed buying, a restaurant they wanted to try, building the mundane foundation that real relationships required. When Damien finally left, promising to call her later, to see her soon, to stop being an idiot about his own feelings, he felt different, lighter, as if he'd been carrying weight for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. He drove home to his penthouse, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt empty. Because sanctuary wasn't a place, he realized. It was a person. Someone who saw your darkness and didn't run. Someone who believed you were worthy of love even when you didn't believe it yourself. Someone who stayed. And Elena, with her clear green eyes, and her stubborn hope, and her refusal to let him hide behind his carefully constructed walls. She was teaching him something he'd thought was impossible, that he could be completely himself, complicated and damaged and afraid, and still be loved. Not despite those things, but including them. That being too innocent wasn't her problem. Being too scared to accept what she offered was his. But he was learning, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. He was learning to stay, to try, to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved the light she was offering. And that, he thought, driving through the morning city with the taste of her terrible coffee still in his mouth and the memory of her warmth still wrapped around him, was worth every terrifying moment. Some things he finally understood were worth being afraid for.